Ooh. All right. So today, all right, everyone says Happy New Year, right? But happiness is just one of the core six feelings or one of the nine rasas that we as humans exhibit. And it's just a smaller time slice of the whole spectrum of joy itself. So instead of saying Happy New Year, is there a better way to articulate this? So then we have to really understand what are we wishing others. So from the Internet of Value ecosystem, we look at an individual and the representation of an individual as a well-being identity. So what goes into that is the base layer is physiology, because without this body, I mean, you can talk spiritually like, Nirvana Shatakam, I'm not my body, I'm not my mind and everything. Or you can say from a quantum field theory standpoint, we are all made of the same waves that is sustaining the matter. So we are essentially made of the same waves, right? But that doesn't lead to any of the economic transactions possible in a meaningful way. So it's better to have a well-being identity. So then we kind of stack up the bricks that builds up this identity of a person or any individual for that matter. So the base layer is physiology, and physiology is anything related to the body. From the Indian darshan standpoint, this could be considered the first sheet, the 5 layers, and inside that the first one is um, Annamaya Kosha, right? And but let's see. So this we are essentially perceiving the world through this body itself and the 5 senses of the body. And there are certain things that are happening inside at a thought level. We'll come to that at a later stage. So the physiology essentially can be put into a good state where it can perceive the real world, or don't call that Maya. It can perceive the world around us in a way through the 5 senses. So for the 5 senses to be really at its best, then we have to think about movement. The movement could be yoga, workout, kickboxing, dance, running, any movement. And then there is a resting period, and the rest period could be, something like a non-sleep deep rest or yoga nidra, which is not a sleep state, but somewhere between conscious and unconscious state. So then there is sleep. So movement, rest, and then the feeding part, what you're having and what you're not having, which could come under fasting, prolonged fasting and whatnot, or the type of diet that you're on at this moment in time in your life. So that's physiology. All this leads to physiology, right? Like that builds up this body and the 5 senses through which we perceive the world. Then comes the emotions and feelings layer. There's a specific reason why we have kept emotions and feelings as 2 separate layers, because there's something that's happening at a neurochemical level or neurophysiological level. The moment your eyes perceive this, then the light is going into your eye, the photons are going into your eyes. When you're touching something, then there's something that's going to your brain, right? Because that's the processing unit. So for that to happen, there are certain neurochemical states in your body, which is making this interpretation possible. The typical things are dopamine, adrenaline, endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin. All these are neurochemicals which are making this interpretation possible. But instead of saying my adrenaline is high, my dopamine levels are low, you would put a cognitive term or a vocabulary on top of it, which we call as feelings. So that's why I said happiness is one of the core 6 feelings, the others being sadness, anger, surprise, and whatnot. And then there are 9 rasas as well, if you look at the Indian darshan standpoint. Anyway, so the feelings has underlying neurochemical, neurophysiological state of your body. So if I take a snapshot of my body right now, that is the emotional state of my body. But the word that I could use to explain the emotional state of my body is the feeling. So we understood physiology, we understood emotions and feelings, and all this is getting into this brain and it's processing, right? It's processing, and a thought emerges. And this thought can be related to what we are perceived, or it could happen totally at your dream state as well. So there's conscious thoughts and unconscious and subconscious thoughts, but we are talking about conscious thoughts. So at this point, so how? So then it's not just what we are perceived at this moment, but also goes all the way to how we have evolved, right? So you see something moving over here, and your first response is, "Oh man, is that a snake over there?" But then you observe closely because that's your first um, a reptilian brain that's reacting to that, and that has millions of years of evolution, and it's essentially to put us in a alert phase so that we can make a move or stand and observe or run towards it and face it head on. So the thoughts also then depends on the vocabulary set that you have. Right now I'm using English language, but my mother tongue is Tamil, right? So am I better at conversing in Tamil to put that state of my body or and the people in front of me, right? Like I'm trying to now put this out, which means it's going to reach a certain set of people. But with AI and other things, now you can translate it, but I'm not sure how much of the essence of what I'm saying would be the same in different languages. So let's say I translate this into Spanish. Um, will that have the same impact on people the way that it would happen in the words that I'm using to converse right now, right? So there is biases, the language, and if you go all the way back, how is your childhood where you're attached, detached, and let's say trauma. So all those things are affecting on that one perceived image or sense input that has come to the brain, and the thought is emerging. Now this is all happening inside, right? So the physiology, emotions, feelings, thoughts, all this are internal. No one can really see it unless I articulate it, right? So the fact that I chose to articulate it and put up a cam over there and record it, that gets into the next two layers, which is performance, but a mid layer that connects the two things is habits. Performance is what's happening now, right? So this is where I think our Navrasas and Natya Shastra of Indian way of looking at these things, but essentially, Shakespeare calls it the whole world is a stage and we are all actors on the stage, right? And then there could be George Collins' way of looking at the same thing where he says, yeah, everything is happening on the stage, but if you're born in the US, you get a front row seat. And for a longer period, I used to say that, but if you're born in India, then you get the last row seat. So you get to see the actors on the stage and you get to see everyone else before you, right? From the first seated guys who are the US, let's assume George Collins is right, and then all the way up to, and we are in the last stage, we are chilling kind of a thing. But now, as I'm getting older, I'm thinking that we as Indians have a seat somewhere in the middle. So it's like you're watching it on IMAX and there's a very specific area where you sit, where you have the best visual and the auditory experience, right? So I think Indians have that space. Anyway, so the point being, everything is performance, right? But the fact that you are able to take this micro actions to create a performance, right? Now this is where the reality and the AI world, I mean, it's going to merge at some point in time, but at least within the Internet of Value, what I'm trying to create is no edits, no music, and just the raw version of whatever I'm performing or shooting right now, right? And though people call it authenticity, raw and everything, but there is this layers that's adding to the performance, right? So it's never really raw. Also, what is raw, right? Um, because at some point there's all this filtering happening in your brain, like it's putting it, like stitching together words to form sentences so that it can create a narrative, and that itself, there's editing happening over here. So unless you have like real, like the OMI kind of OMI or OMI kind of devices where it can like detect thoughts, I think we are close to that, then that could be raw. But then the question of data infringement and other things come in as well. Anyway, to recap, there's this physiology which is putting all our senses in the best possible state to be in so that we can perceive and then we can engage with the world. That's physiology. And then emotions and feelings, and then thoughts, and that translates to habits, which leads to the performance. So these are the 6 nodes that goes into what we call as the well-being score. Now, with respect to performance, then I can go one level deeper and say the most valuable version of me to the people around me is the skills that I'm honing and I would have accrued over a period of time. So if I'm talking about, let's say this is, if you go and read Internet of Value, you'll understand the first person experience and the secondary research that has gone behind it. So there's some kind of weightage to the way or to the words that I'm speaking right now. Unlike, so let's say I talk about music, like, the limited experience in terms of listening, limited experience in terms of playing certain instruments, but I never got it, intuitively. So you shouldn't take seriously if I'm talking about music. But whereas if I talk about well-being score, then there is some weightage to it. What weightage the market will decide, the viewers are going to decide, right? Like the collection of viewers make the market as well if there is a transaction involved. Anyway, so within performance, related to a skill, if I'm performing, then that's the most valuable thing, right? So instead of talking about music, I should be talking about this, right? So having this boundary of, okay, this physiology, emotions, feelings, thoughts, habits, performance, and within performance, what are the 2-3 skills that we're optimizing for, right? So for me, it's business growth, community building, systems modeling, and let's say, so those 3 skills are the core that I'm optimizing for. But for me to most of these skills, the hard skills, which the market usually pays for, is more of a single player game. So let's say learning to code, right? You don't need other people as of now. But the moment you're trying to work together on something, then there is soft skills, right? Like the intangibles, so to speak, but everything can be quantified at least to some extent. So soft skills here could be what? Teamwork, communication, leadership, whatnot, right? Storytelling. All these things come under the soft skills part of it. Mind you, we are still under performance. We're saying the hard skills, there are soft skills. Now, if you remove all these things, what would be left? What's the compass that's, aligning us would be the virtues and values. And values are the esoteric destinations we all want. Equality, justice, fraternity. So, these are like nice things to have. But virtues are the values in action on a day-to-day basis. Am I able to, so let's say respect for everyone is a value that you uphold, then the virtue that we will be practicing on a day-to-day basis is self-respect. So you would start with, aligning yourself and doing the things that you claim that you're going to do, or talk that you're going to do, or write that you're going to do, and moving inch by inch towards it, or feet by feet, depends on the stage again that you're in. So the virtues and values becomes another parameter that's adding up to all this, right? So we have talked about physiology, emotions, feelings, thoughts, habits, performance. Within performance, you have hard skills, soft skills, and then All this is, within the boundary of the virtues and values that you uphold. But on top of it, you could ask, hey, what about my name? What about the identities that I'm born into? That's a great question, because there are certain identities that we are born into, like the language that I speak, um, the 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 space in which I was born in, and the family socio-economic environment that I was born in, and the country, space at a larger level, country that I was born in. All those things, I didn't have a choice, right? Um, Active choice, let's say. So those things are the identities that you can leverage if you want to, but don't be bogged down by it. And then there are identities that you're curated, which is the skills and from the educational certifications that you have and the work experience that you have, right? So there's like the earned identity and there is the born identity. But all this, if you put together, that becomes, right? So your um, identities, which is the identities that you're born into, the identities that you have garnered over a period of time, and the identity that you have created online, right? Like your LinkedIn identity, your Substack, your YouTube, your Instagram, whatnot, right? So all these things are different types of identities, along with the physiology, emotions, feelings, thoughts, habits, performance, and within performance you have hard skills, soft skills, and all this under the boundaries of the virtues and values. This creates um, a well-being identity, right? So from a systems modeling standpoint, so think of it like a stock, right? It's a destination. So if this identity, the well-being identity, on a day-to-day basis, because that's what we have control over, which is the time and the 24 hours, we're going to obviously break it down into smaller chunks within the days itself. Let's say an ultradian rhythm of like 90 minutes, but for the ease of understanding, let's call it at a circadian rhythm level 24 hours. This 24 hours are keep on going into this identity. Are you stacking up this well-being identity of yourself, or you're removing? That can also happen, right? Like this is, so let's say you've associated yourself with a trauma that happened and you've become a victim of something. That's an identity that you want to get rid of. I don't think that's possible because it's a thought, it's there. You can only tell better stories to leverage. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the point is, so there is a stock and there is an inflow and there is an outflow, purely from a systems modeling standpoint. So we know the parameters that goes into creating this well-being identity. We know the inputs that goes into and the outputs that's coming out. And this is all one feedback loop, right? Like you keep on going back to this. It's a circulating thing which is totally under your control. And beyond this is, your family, your community, your society that you're part of, the market that you're part of, the state that you're part of. But it all starts with one person, their well-being stack or the identity stack, and the 24-hour input that goes into all this thing. So we wrote a 3-part series about how we can arrive at this. So the first one is the audit, just to see how your current 24 hours are going. And then align is to create this well-being identity and have this higher version of yourself that you can align towards or look towards. Have it as a goal, a destination. We may not reach there, but might as well try or give our best effort. Some days we'll go faster, some days we'll go like 10 steps behind. That's okay, as long as we are clear that that's the compass that we are pointing towards that. And the third one is the architecting this 24 hours that we have towards this. So there's audit, there's align, and then there is architecting your 24 hours to reach this ideal or the higher self that we can think of for ourselves. And obviously once you architect and you start doing, then you will come back and do an audit again, right? So that's the inflow and the outflow, and it creates this closed loop system. And mind you, closed loop system always tends towards entropy, which means chaos. So, but at least this closed loop is completely under our control, right? Tomorrow you come and tell me, hey, these are not the 6 variables that I want to track. There could be something else. And then that works for you. Great, go ahead and do it. And tell me why it makes sense to you, and we can have a rational debate about it, right? So, all this to say, instead of saying Happy New Year, a well New Year. I wish you a well New Year. A well New Year means a physiology that holds you and your ideas and the world's ideas, if you will, and an emotions and feelings layer which creates a well regulated emotional and a feelings map of you, and a well examined thought layer, not a thoughtful, not a thoughtless, but an examined thought layer, and a well practiced, which is the habits, right? The on and off of good and bad habits and whatnot, or positive valence and negative valence habits, and a well performed life that's contributing to your evolving identity, which is your higher self. So instead of saying Happy New Year, I wish you a well New Year. Thank you.